How can I stop self-harming? I'm here in front of you today to talk about my experience with self-harm. Before we begin, please take into consideration that this will be triggering to some. It is triggering for me to even write it, to read it, to speak it. If you need to leave the room for any reason at any moment, please do. My story is not an easy one to hear. It was not an easy one to live. I'm not here to vilify self-harm, nor am I here to glorify it. I'm here to discuss it, get it out in the open, maybe change the way you think about it, the way you feel about it. In order to do so, I must lean into the pain, show you how I changed it into love, show you how I came to accept my self-harm as a part of me without wishing it wasn't. There's so much stigma surrounding this act, these acts, that it's attention-seeking, that it's dramatic, that you should just ignore it, that it's not severe enough to warrant action. A lot of people don't realize that usually when you hurt yourself, it's not for anyone else. Those of us who self-harm use it as a tool to stay alive. If anyone in this room has felt the need to do this too, I want you to know I'm proud of you. You're still here. That's amazing. Life is worth living. That probably sounds empty coming from someone you don't know, but trust me. By the end of this, you'll know me better than half my friends do. Things I've only alluded to as jokes that hit a little too close to home. Maybe you'll even have a better sense of knowing you. I'm going to start this story by telling you the ending, because it's a happy one, or if not always happy, at least it turned out okay. I'm okay. I'm 28 and a half now. I have a 6-year-old who is my everything. I have 3 cats who are the best fluffy family ever. I'm surrounded by love and kindness every day. I'm okay. Somehow I'm okay. In this speech that is also a poem, I'm going to talk about my parents a lot. If they're listening to this, they may feel like I threw them under the bus. That's not the case. I'm inviting them inside the bus, inviting you all inside the bus to come for a ride with me, see things from my perspective, to see the way I view these situations. I have to describe what they did so you can understand what I've done, what I've felt, who I've become. In the end, I've reconciled with my parents. They both had hard childhoods, absent, alcoholic, abusive, adjectives that describe my grandparents. These adjectives also describe my own parents. They walked in the same footsteps as their parents before them. They perpetuated the same abuse they had endured growing up to a slightly lesser degree onto us, their children. I've come to terms with what happened. I've forgiven where I could, understood where I couldn't forgive, decided to see the people in my life who have hurt me as imperfect humans like me, so I could keep them in my life now that things are better. Because they are better. Things always get better. To truly understand what I'm going to be talking about, I need to give you a little background about myself first. Before we dive into the trauma, I need to show you around my brain. From a young age, I felt different. I've always felt different. I don't know how much of me is learned protective behaviors and how much of me I was born with. As far back as I can remember, I've always been able to sense other people's emotions. Their feelings bleed into the air surrounding us. I find myself breathing their thoughts. It's an invasion of privacy sometimes when I accidentally read someone's mind. I've always been sensitive to certain noises. The sound of my sister gulping water, if anyone gulping water. In fact, saying the word gulping makes me want to rip my ears off. I used to hide away in my room reading book after book. I never played with my toys, just lined them up and gave them all backstories. I love organization. For example, my t-shirt closet is arranged in rainbow order. The sight of it makes me happier than words can describe. Speaking of words, when I get consumed with emotion, which happens often, I physically cannot speak, sometimes for a short time, sometimes for hours. Emotions are very overwhelming for me. I feel things deeply. Because of this, technically, my self-harm started from a very young age. I'd melt down and hit my head against walls, either in sadness that turned to anger or just pure rage. I'd destroy things, especially homework assignments. I'm a perfectionist with a tendency to get frustrated easily. The last time I cried in class was college. I am never late. I have to be chronically early. The idea of being late sets me into a panic. My brain can't seem to manage the possibility of not staying on schedule. When plans get changed unexpectedly, I feel weird for the rest of the day. I'm not very resilient in that way. I've been diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses from multiple health professionals, yet none of them really resonate with me. Instead, I just say I'm neurodivergent with a touch of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, the criteria for which is long-term chronic abuse. I survived an entire childhood of long-term chronic abuse. Due to this abuse, my memory of my childhood is fragmented. It's hard to go in chronological order for this story since so much of it is black, blank, missing. There are doors I've hidden painful parts of my life behind. These doors are locked. The keys have all become rusted, warped, thrown away. Some of the wood for some of the doors is rotting, allowing little bits of memories to escape. They catch me off guard, take my breath away. I never know which day will become a trauma day until it happens. I have a bad case of imposter syndrome when it comes to my history. I lived in a house that was warm. I had an allowance, was provided for financially. Anything I wanted, I could have. I was never technically food insecure. The pantry and fridge were stocked at both homes, even if no one was cooking. I know that having your basic needs met is at the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy. It still feels like somehow I'm faking. All that was missing was the emotional connection between my parents and I. How could it have been so damaging to not get the love I needed? I can't begin to tell you how I've realized years later that I was abused or groomed. I had no idea at the time. No one was there educating me that maybe drinking every weekend and on multiple weekdays wasn't healthy. I was never taught how to handle my emotions. My parents couldn't handle their own. They had no room for mine. I didn't know there are methods for calming down that don't involve hurting yourself. I was never taught basic self-care, basic life skills. I had to teach myself how to shave my own legs with razors I would then dismantle to use in other ways. No one was there loving me. The two people who had brought me into the world abandoned me, not physically, emotionally abandoned me. All of these experiences exist within me, have shaped me, are part of me. It's too bad the timeline is fuzzy. I'll do my best to hit the important dates and events just to know. I feel like an unreliable narrator to my own story. I was 14 when my parents split. Things were bad for much longer before then. I've written poems that start and end with, "Dad, Mom, why do you have to drink so much?" Every paper bag was filled with aluminum cans, glass bottles, a whole cabinet devoted to alcohol, a beer fridge in the basement. Thinking it was standard that your parents drank every night, that they had friends over to drink nearly every night, that you were taught how to make mixed drinks as a child. I loved making Bloody Marys. I'd fetch around for the whole room, seeking their approval, would make a non-alcoholic one for myself, trying to feel included. I listened to them talk for hours about other friends, their work, stories from their past, not wanting anyone to leave. When their friends did leave, inevitably, or when there weren't any friends over to begin with, that's when things got ugly. My dad can still be an angry drunk. My mom was never any good at anticipating his anger, was unable to see the patterns of his behavior. When they were together, they would fight. I have memories of chairs thrown at walls, yelling that should have shattered the windows, oceans of tears on our kitchen floor. My little sister crawling into my twin bed with me. We'd hide, hold each other so tight, or breathing in sync in fight or flight, sometimes falling asleep glued to each other's sides, sometimes listening for the sound of one of them walking up our creaky stairs. We knew by the sound who it was going to be, either our mom coming to drag us out of bed and take us away again, or our dad, belligerent and drunk, heading to sleep, his reign of terror at an end for the night. When it was our mom, she'd quickly get my sister and I, teleport us to a friend's house, yet she'd leave my older brother behind. He was in the room right next to us. Why did she leave him behind? Why did he stay behind? My sister and I think it's because our brother is my dad's golden child. I can't remember, though, if she chose to abandon him or if he just refused enough times that she gave up trying. Interestingly, my sister is my mom's golden child, a carbon copy of her with blue eyes. I was the black sheep of the family, the middle child, the one meant to be seen, not heard, preferably not seen that often. Because of this, I learned from a very young age to remain unseen during calm times while they fought, always. I learned to tune out the shouting, how to ignore my own biological needs like being thirsty in order to stay hidden upstairs in the bedroom I shared with my sister. If I knew they were drinking, they always were. I knew they were going to start arguing. They always did. It was better to preemptively disappear. At least it was, in those early years. There were good times too, don't get me wrong. Birthday parties, beach days, movie nights, funny jokes, a few vacations. Those never outweighed the bad. I didn't think the bad could get any worse. We were already living in this war zone of a family constantly torn apart, sewn back together. I hardly ever saw my parents showing affection to each other. The only times they interacted were for business or to argue. Still, I wasn't expecting that when my parents separated, it would get worse. In fact, I don't believe I even considered what was already happening was all that bad to begin with. It was our version of normal. Isn't this what all families do? Make each other cry, yell at each other every night, throw things at walls, floors, and family members? Unfortunately for us kids, the bad did get worse. My dad was heartbroken. My mom was the love of his life. Sure, they never really got along, but he loved her so fiercely that when she left him, his only solace was the whiskey. My mom was ecstatic, ready to be free, so free that she forgot about me and my siblings, refused to talk to us about anything to do with the impending divorce, the fracturing of our dysfunctional family. She found another man, a man who she could pretend was a better dad, yet he was just as bad, controlling, manipulative, weak. I hated him the moment I met him for good reason. They'd go to the bar every weekend, where my mom tried to forget everything. My little sister went to live with my mom. I stayed with my dad and older brother. I stayed in the house that I had grown up in. If everything was being turned upside down, at least I'd be in a familiar environment. I didn't realize that familiar isn't always better. Familiar was where my angry alcoholic father resided. My mom is not blameless in any of these interactions. I do really believe, though, that she, back then, was the lesser of two evils. Her biggest problem was that she was absent. My dad was simply abusive. Before my mom left, all of my dad's anger was directed at her. Once she left, his anger had nowhere to go. My brother, sister, and I became the martyrs. He was angry with her for leaving him, unable to process his emotions, turned to a bottle to dull the feelings, wound up heightening them. When the anger spilled out, we were easy victims. I was an easy victim. I'd accidentally trigger him somehow in his drunken haze for saying the wrong thing, for looking the wrong way, for existing in our shared space. It's possible I reminded him of her. It happened so often that during this time, I don't remember any happy nights. Every night felt like a fight for my life. He never touched me. I don't believe he ever hit any of us. As far as physical abuse goes, I'm not sure if he hit my mom more than once. I know of one time it involved a chair. I wasn't there. Never once did he hit me. I did hit him one time, slapped his glasses clean off his face. He started coming for me. My brother stood in his way. That feeling of power in that moment of acting in self-defense finally, physically helped get me through subsequent days. Despite not hitting me, my dad was still physically aggressive. He would get in my face and try to intimidate me, smash things, slam things, stomp his feet, his rage clearly etched on his face, spit flying from his lips as he used his voice to permanently damage my hearing. Actually, I don't know if this is true, that he damaged my hearing, but my mom has the same hearing loss. Maybe it's genetic, or maybe it's a result of our shared experience. Either way, I was so angry at him, at my mom, at everything, that when he started yelling, I did too. If he was going to start a fight, I was going to finish it. We'd argue, we'd break things, he'd call me names like worthless, useless, waste of... You get the idea. The holidays were the worst due to the perceived expectations of what a happy family holiday should be. When I'd cry in front of him, which I did a lot, I'm an angry crier, he'd get angrier. I don't want to hear it from the peanut gallery. He'd say he wished he had left too, would be leaving soon, either in his van driving off to live on the moon or by suicide. My siblings and I begged him to stay. Don't tell us that, Dad. Don't go. We love you. We need you. Maybe we should have let him go. You don't know how volatile that love was. You don't know how volatile that love was. He'd go from raging to sobbing uncontrollably. We'd give him a hug, wrap him up in our arms, listen to his stories of his abuse from his childhood, all while being abused for our childhood. After all that, my dad would wake up the next morning not remembering anything. Maybe if we were lucky, he would give a stuttering apology to the tune of, well, something must have made me angry. His anger was not ours to hold, and yet he gave it to us as readily as the rain falls from the sky, droplets falling into your eyes, mixing with your tears that are falling on deaf ears. I started to believe what he said, that those words were true, that the way I was being treated by my parents somehow had some form of my own self-worth attached to it. My father's anger, his words, my mom's avoidance, her apathy became a reflection of me. My self-harm was dangerous. Inside my head was worse. Using pain as a way to get myself away from those thoughts saved me. I want everyone to take a moment and look at my left forearm. These are only a portion of my scars. This is what they look like after years of time to fade. There were more that weren't deep enough to remain. My left thigh is riddled with the exact same marks. All of my self-inflicted bruises are healed and gone, yet when I look in the mirror, I see the evidence of where I used to punch myself. If you didn't know, you wouldn't realize that my right side of my face is permanently changed due to my self-harm. The cheekbone is higher, it's a different shape. I can almost see the imprint of my knuckles, a constant reminder of the pain. As I wrote this, my right cheek started to hurt, almost like it can remember too how it felt to be bruised. There were days where I wished my father would hit me so the pain he was causing wouldn't be so inside me, though, so that someone, anyone would see what was happening, would do something to save me. What happened instead was that once the situations were diffused, thanks to my mediator older brother, or when my dad was passed out snoring in a chair because his glossy eyes couldn't stay open any longer, or I'd walked away sobbing to the sound of him continuing to berate someone else, or just hurling insults at an empty room, I'd go find something sharp to use or clench my hand into a fist to process what had just happened in the only way I knew. I don't remember the first times I self-harmed by cutting. I don't remember what I used. I don't remember how it felt, but I do remember the bracelet I wore to hide those first small scars on my left wrist. It was wide, white, beaded, one part over corsage that my dad had bought me before my first military ball that I attended through JROTC. I was wearing that bracelet over fresh scars one morning when a teacher told me he had never seen someone smile as much as me. I still have that bracelet buried in a bin full of memories too painful to look through. When I first started cutting, I did try to hide it. Very quickly, though, I stopped hiding it. I made an unconscious decision to make it obvious. I didn't care if anyone saw. Maybe I secretly wanted someone to see, secretly hoped that someone would help me. It turns out the only help that came was half-hearted, in the form of a therapist my mom had gotten me. She gets 10 points for trying. The therapist moved away within a year. I never trusted her enough to tell her anything that would really change the situations. My mom never found me a new one. She had moved on, had attempted all she could for me. She had better things to do now. All she taught me was that my self-inflicted injuries weren't serious enough for any real help. She wasn't going to save me. She wasn't there for me. The one person in life who was irrevocably supposed to protect you had abandoned me. As an adult, I found out that my mom thought my dad had been hitting me based on my self-inflicted injuries. Now that really puts things in perspective. She did nearly nothing to get me out of that situation. Where was she? Our neighbors who came over to drink even after my parents split up, they lived close enough that they could hear his abuse reverberating through the walls. One of them was even a cop, protect and serve. Ha! They did nothing to get me out. If even one adult in our life had stepped up and said, "That's enough, you can't do this to your kids. I'm calling Child Protective Services," things would be so different. I would be so different, but they didn't. There's no use reminiscing about should have, or maybe there is only what happened. I don't really remember my siblings being there, except for specific times when my brother stepped in to protect me. He was always protecting me. I think I did the same for my little sister, or at least I hope I did. I know I tried to take the brunt of our father's anger. My sister was still operating like we had as kids. She tried her best to camouflage into the background. My sister was scared of him. I wasn't. Instead, I antagonized him, drew him to me, matched his anger to try and free myself from all of the feelings inside of me. My poor brother was always playing referee between my father and me. My brother was more of a father to me than my dad ever was during that time. I remember begging my dad to cook us dinner, something, anything. Instead, my brother learned to cook. Dinner was usually at 10 p.m. He wasn't great about his timing. Sometimes I'd get hangry. That's okay. Looking back on it, a late dinner was better than no dinner at all. There was lots of soup. It's still my favorite food that isn't a fruit. I was just grateful that it was real, that it wasn't something I had to heat up from a package, a bag, a can, again, that someone had made us a home-cooked meal on an average day, not a holiday, not for any special occasion, not to celebrate. Days my brother cooked for us were always a little less gray. Amidst all of this, I should mention that I started drinking when I was 12 or 13. I started smoking weed well before that. It's funny, I want to remember my first times drinking and smoking, but I can't. I'm pretty sure I just picked it up because that's what everyone was doing around me. My parents, my brother, my cousins who lived on the same street. Yeah, I had great role models. My father is the one who bought me the alcohol, saying if I was going to drink, I should do it safely. Well, guess what, Dad? There's nothing safe about underage drinking. I found myself in so many questionable situations. I made so many reckless choices. I've driven under the influence of hallucinogens and alcohol. I have hurt people that I care about most, have been less than reliable, canceling work and plans with friends due to drugs and drinking, their use all stemming from my unchecked mental illnesses. I crossed paths with people who are now gravestones. Thanks to drug use and violence, the trails I walked were slippery. I could have fallen at any moment. I'm so lucky. I do know that I hung onto this world by threads of kindness, given to me by my friends who sat with me every lunch period, worked with me for every class project, studied with me for exams in a corner coffee shop that has since gone out of business, who loved me. All of me. Kindness given to me by my teachers, who allowed me to stay after school where I helped them recycle clay. The art substitute who saw my pain and looked at me with the most loving eyes I'd ever seen. Kindness given to me by the families I babysat for, whose children loved me so unconditionally that they gave me all of the positive feelings I was missing. Not many of my families know that their children made such a difference in my life that without them, I really believe I would have attempted suicide. Being their favorite babysitter gave me a reason to stay alive. I avoided my dad's house, my mom's house, as much as I could. On weekdays, I would wake up at 5 a.m., would get dressed and ready for the day, walk to school, get there by 6. I would stay until 9 p.m. Every weekend was a party as often as I could make it be. I didn't want to be at home. In fact, I left home as soon as I could. Graduated high school at 17, moved in with a friend in Hancock, then became a live-in nanny, tried to make them my new family. The self-harm didn't stop. By then it was as much a part of me as my freckles that I get from my mom, or my brown hair and brown eyes that I get from my dad. After a gap year off school where I worked and partied and made lots of mistakes, I started college where I worked and partied and made lots of mistakes. I had been depressed, going out of my mind for years and years, using self-harm to cope, using other people's approval to cope, using alcohol to cope. I didn't know how to be okay in a life where things were not okay within my brain. I sought out therapy, joined a sorority, had a mile-long list of casual lovers, tried to focus on my classes, on the future. That's hard to do when you grew up believing you wouldn't be here past 18. I really thought that before I was an official adult, I'd have made my exit. My self-harm made those thoughts manageable. If I could hurt myself one more time, restrict my life in one more way, gain control over the uncontrollable, somehow I could live to see another day. I lived to see 18, 19, 20, year by year, month by month, week by week, day by day. In early 2017, I got pregnant unexpectedly. I was 21. The baby's father and I weren't dating. I hardly knew anything about him. He hardly knew anything about me. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't bear to lose that baby who wasn't even a baby yet, just a tiny blastocyst of cells with the slightest beginning of a heartbeat. You see, I couldn't abandon him in the way my parents had abandoned me. I was only 6 weeks along. This marks the turning point in my story. I couldn't take care of myself. For that baby, I'd do anything. Maybe it's cliche, but my son saved me. I tell him he is all the best parts of me. Because of him, I had an overwhelming feeling of wanting to do better, to show him how life is supposed to be. In order to do that, I had to focus on my own healing. I have been in recovery from self-harm since April 2017. Have I relapsed? Absolutely. Will I relapse again? It's likely, but it's different now. My self-harm, I've learned that even when I relapse, I don't have to keep going back. I've developed healthier coping strategies, distraction techniques, instead of self-harming every time I feel like I did as a teen. When I do find myself in that scene, the best thing I have done is practice harm reduction. I keep sterile sharps, antibiotic cream, and gauze bandages on hand, hidden in my closet. I don't punch my face anymore. There's too much risk for injury. I don't harm in exposed areas anymore. There's too much risk of infection. I go months without it, sometimes a year. When I do relapse, I allow myself to feel all of my feelings, try to let them go, call my therapist, promise myself if I can make it until that appointment, I can do it again if I still feel like it. If I don't still feel like it, I set another goal, infinite, until the next time when I land just a tiny bit shy of the finish line, which is fine. I'm not perfect. I've always taken pictures of my scars, of my bruises. I'm not sure why. It's a compulsion for me to take a picture of the fresh marks. Perhaps having a picture makes it more real somehow. Knowing that they'll heal someday gives me a certain amount of anxiety. They won't always be there. Someday the pain will leave. They'll change. What if I need them and they're gone? I had a partner who got angry with me for doing that, for taking pictures of my own self-harm, as if they had any place to say what I could or could not do with my body. Even if I was hurting myself, it's still my body to do with what I want. It's not up to them. It's not up to anybody. The pictures that I took that I may take in the future are not triggering to me. They are healing. Sometimes when I want to self-harm, I look for those pictures. Seeing them makes it easier. I can pretend like I've already done it. In doing so, I last another day without it. If you self-harm and have been shamed for the ways that you interact with it in order to go longer without self-harming, screw whoever said what it was they said. No one can shame you for healing in your own way. They're not in your brain. They don't know your own individual pain. Don't let them gatekeep your mental illness. The trauma will stay. For me, the trauma has stayed. I don't think my nervous system will ever forget those times. Sometimes I find my heart races when a door is slammed or someone raises their voice. The thing is, my trauma is not a spiral. It's not sucking me down until I'm trapped forever, unable to sense anything but darkness. It's closer to large ocean waves crashing into my body. If I plant my feet in the sand, I will stay upright. Even better, I can walk away. You're the one who gets to choose if you remain. I've had to walk away from situations that weren't serving me, relationships where I was not being heard. Sometimes people don't perceive you. They don't see you. They just see who they think you are. Even if you explain, don't compromise your own mental or physical health for anyone else. You are the most important person in your life. In relation to self-harm, I don't think about it every day anymore. There are a lot of things that trigger the urge, but I'm able to see a kitchen knife as strictly a kitchen knife, usually. When people brush up against my scars, I don't try to pull away frantically anymore. The feeling of them causing my brain to remember those days, I don't see them as a bad thing. My scars, they're my friends. They kept me alive during the hardest parts of my life. I'm grateful for my self-harm. It's beautiful in the way a forest fire destroys everything in its path in order to create new life. My sister and I are close now. We share the things we write about from the hard times. We share our day-to-day lives, rejoice in each other's happiness, comfort each other when adversities arise. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of relationship with my brother. Sometimes we talk, we'll see each other in passing, but we don't see eye to eye on political issues now. I don't seek his companionship. He has difficulties not speaking out about things that directly conflict with my core beliefs. People talk about disowning those who threaten your identities, who don't respect minorities, who voted for Trump in 2016, or tried to at least. I am part of the LGBTQIA plus community as a pansexual, polyamorous, non-binary, transmasculine individual. My son is of Korean descent on his father's side. I know I should probably cut off all ties, yet I can't disown my brother, just like I can't disown my parents after all they did. My brother has done so much for me. I had always looked up to him as a child, but at 14, when the ground fell out from underneath us, he was always there as a protector, stepping in between me and my father, knowing just what to say to get him to go away, as a friend, allowing me to spend time with him and his friends, even though I was 3 years younger. As my own personal chef, the truth is, I love my siblings, no matter what, unconditionally. We've all been through the same thing, even if their stories are different. If the way they perceived it was different, we were still always there for each other. We'll still always be. I hope they read or listen to this speech. I hope it helps them like it's helped me. There's so much more I want to write about my life, but I'm delivering this speech to teens, primarily to help teens. I was a teen when these things happened to me. Still, I can't speak about all of it to you. No teen, no child should have to go through the things I went through. I didn't have a great childhood. I was 14 when that childhood ended. 14 when all the security I knew ended. Even if it was tumultuous to begin with, at least it was predictable. It had a script. I could anticipate the play, a performance that I could watch every day. I knew where to sit when intermission was. Now, life feels like a free fall. It's always been like that. I just couldn't see it until my family was ripped away. I found myself alone. I felt so alone. If you feel alone, I want you to know that while writing this poem, I found myself getting angry again. Not specifically at anyone in particular. Instead, I was finding I was angry that anyone has to feel the ways I did, that anyone has undergone the same or worse abuse that I did. Abuse is not natural, it is learned. I believe that true human nature is love. My heart is love. That's all I want to do is love. I love myself more these days. I love my scars more these days. I love that I lived through it, came out the other side. I'm here in this room telling you my story today. I was so excited to be asked to speak here. This story has been begging to be written on a page. It wants to be used to change how people interact with other people, how we interact with ourselves, to show you that love is the way. Love is always the way. Choose love for yourself today, for your family, for your friends. Choose to love even when there is so much pain that you find yourself hurting yourself again. Love that you can still feel pain. That means you're alive. Try to extend the time in between if you can. Ask for help if you can. Reach out to someone, anyone. There's always a hand willing to take yours. It could be an unexpected one, but it's there. You're here. Don't give up. Stay here with us. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I can say that with conviction now. I couldn't say that last year. Somehow I'm still here. The suicide hotline number is 988. If you want to hurt yourself, call them. I have had to call them more times than I can count. There were times I should have called but didn't. I wound up worse because of it. If you don't want to call the hotline, call a friend. Call a family member. You don't have to tell them what's going on. You can pretend to be okay until you are. Chat about the weather, about their animals, about school or sports. Ask a local grocery store even. Call a local grocery store even. Ask them if they have your favorite food in stock. If so, how much does it cost? Sign up for a telemarketing service. Wait for them to call you. Listen to their pitch. You might be the only one that day who doesn't hang up immediately. Call anyone. Whatever small talk you can manage will help. I promise every extra minute is 1 minute closer to better. I've already said this, but I need to stress that things get better. Life gets better. Please don't take your boat out in stormy weather to prove a point that may not be there tomorrow. I spent a long time deciding how to end this. It was difficult because I didn't want to stop writing. My story doesn't have a conclusion. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still living. When I wrote for you for today would have been significantly different 5 years ago, would be significantly different 5 years from now. That's the beauty of change. This may be the end of my poem, of my speech. This is not the end of my story. Everyone in this room still has hundreds upon thousands of blank pages waiting to be filled. I know that I'm going to write and write and write until my story is so full of love and hope and life that the first chapters filled with pain and suffering and anger are less than 10% of the whole book, until those aren't the parts of the story that stick with you when you do a book review. I'm going to smile until it's etched on my face. As I age, my smile lines will say more about me than the scars I gave myself as a teen and young adult. My laughter is going to be louder than my sobs. I'm going to look within, comfort my inner child, use my experiences to change people's lives, to help others. I am going to die someday, maybe from an accident, an illness, or old age. When I do, it won't be because of me. I refuse. I refuse to leave early. My self-harm saved me. If I can make it through everything from my past, I can make it through next week. I can make it through anything life throws at me. I will be better for it. You can do the same. Take your pain, transform it into love, into acceptance. Become more yourself by allowing all parts of you to get to know each other. Self-harm, self-hate, suicidal tendencies, they are not your enemy. Society wants you to ignore them. Learn to love them instead, to love yourself. You deserve love because you are a human. Each one of you is just who you need to be. You are all beautiful, imperfect. like me. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, for being you. That's my speech.